It's no secret that Donald Trump and others in his orbit hold much of the higher education sector in disdain, with him characterizing some of the nation's top universities as havens of anti-Semitism and peddlers of radical left ideology. It should be no surprise then that since returning to office, Trump has been waging a multi-front pressure campaign on US universities that has upended higher education, with wide-ranging demands made of institutions, billions of dollars of funding under threat, and a crackdown on international students and campus protests. So in this video, we're going to explain Trump's offensive against US universities, what he's doing, why he's doing it, and what the consequences might be. Don't feel overwhelmed by endless news stories. Find out exactly what you need to know every day with TLDR's Daily Briefing. Listen along in your favorite podcast app or by clicking the link in the description. As we alluded to earlier, Trump and the wider American conservative movement's hostility towards universities is not a new phenomenon, with him taking aim at affirmative action policies, diversity programs, curricula, transgender sports policies, alleged liberal bias, and more. However, things have intensified over the past year and a half, as the protest movement against Israel's war in Gaza swept across university campuses across the country, perhaps most prominently at New York's Columbia University. Trump has labelled these pro-jihadist protests, and Columbia was one of the first colleges to be targeted by his administration, which accused the university of failing to comply with anti-discrimination laws and meet its obligations to protect Jewish students. In March, Trump moved to cut $400 million in federal funds to Columbia, demanding a wide array of policy changes to restore the money and safeguard billions in future funding. Columbia largely capitulated to Trump's demands, as the university agreed to implement reforms including restricting masks on campus, banning protests in academic buildings, empowering new campus security officers to remove or arrest people, carrying out a thorough review of its Middle East studies programs, wider curriculum and admissions policies, adopt a formal definition of anti-Semitism, boost its Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies, and more. But Columbia is far from the only institution to face significant pressure from Trump. At least 7 universities have been singled out for billions of dollars of punitive funding cuts for various reasons, including Harvard, Cornell, and Northwestern, while dozens of other universities are under scrutiny by the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. Many are also among the 10 universities under investigation by Trump's task force to combat anti-Semitism. Now, at this point, we should highlight that the Trump administration's broad accusations of anti-Semitism are contentious, not just with the subjects of said accusations, but also among the Jewish population. In fact, a coalition of 10 leading American Jewish groups, including 3 of the 4 main denominations, have denounced Trump's campus crackdown, saying that the government's escalating federal actions have used the guise of fighting anti-Semitism to justify stripping students of due process rights, punishing constitutionally protected speech, threatening billions in academic research, and weakening free academic inquiry. Nevertheless, the first higher education institution to really put up a fight was Harvard, the nation's oldest and wealthiest university, which is now in what could be a war of attrition with the Trump administration. Harvard, which despite previously making some concessions to the government, drew the line at Trump's sweeping list of demands. Harvard's president Alan Garber accused the government of going beyond its legal power, saying the university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights, adding that no government should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. In response, Trump froze $2.2 billion in federal funding, declaring that Harvard is a joke, teaches hate and stupidity, and should no longer receive federal funds. Now, Harvard, with its $53 billion endowment, is not exactly short of money, so it's not surprising that it's the most equipped and willing institution to lead the resistance against Trump's moves. However, the university has pointed out that its endowment is not a cash machine, and that more than 80% of it is restricted to specific use cases. Exactly what the next steps are remain to be seen, though the confrontation may well end up in court. The Trump administration has also threatened escalatory punitive measures, including further funding and research contract cuts, banning Harvard from enrolling international students, who make up more than 27% of this year's enrollment, and stripping it of its tax-exempt status. Nevertheless, until now, the higher education sector has largely responded to the government's effort to extend its influence over universities with caution, concessions, and capitulation. But Harvard's public pushback against Trump could mark a turning point, perhaps emboldening other institutions to resist the government's efforts themselves. And if this battle continues on this trajectory, i.e. Trump trying to cut, squeeze, and beat universities in submission, it could seriously jeopardize the government-academia-business axis that has been such an engine for the United States for decades, as the symbiotic relationship sees government funds flow into universities whose education, research, and breakthroughs make their way into the public and private sector, driving the country forward. For example, the impact of both punitive and wider governmental cuts are already being felt in scientific research fields. But with public trust in the US higher education system having deteriorated over the past decade, Trump may be acting at an opportune moment to bring about the sweeping overhaul of elite institutions that the American conservative movement has long demanded. However, Trump's offensive is not limited to punitive funding cuts. His administration is also pursuing an expanding crackdown on international students, having revoked at least hundreds, perhaps thousands of student visas. The most notable cases involve students and graduates identified by the government for their political speech and activity, particularly pro-Palestinian activism, whom the government has characterized as Hamas supporters. However, as this visa revocation and deportation push widens, foreign students are apparently having their visas pulled for infractions as minor as a traffic violation. These moves can be seen as the Trump administration seeking to meet several of its goals at once, ramping up its deportation machine, reducing immigration, cracking down on campus protests, and exercising greater control over universities. Among the most high-profile cases is Tufts University student Rümeysa Öztürk, a Turkish national who had her visa revoked and was detained for deportation, having been accused of supporting Hamas, though no evidence has been produced to back up this claim. In fact, her activism appears to have been limited to co-authoring an op-ed that called for her university to, quote, acknowledge the Palestinian genocide and divest from companies with ties to Israel. Öztürk is challenging her potential deportation while being held in a detention center in Louisiana, where another individual involved in a high-profile case, Columbia graduate and Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil, is also being held. Their stories and the widely spread videos of their arrest by plainclothes federal agents have fueled fears in the international student community of a growing crackdown. Ultimately then, the tumult on US campuses risks both a brain drain and financial drain from American universities, as prospective international students may look to study elsewhere because of the threat of arrest and deportation, and academic researchers, facing funding cuts and project closures, consider leaving the country in search of less volatile environments elsewhere. But this story is about far more than just universities. It covers free speech, immigration, federal government power, and cultural influence, with Trump looming large over all. But how does this influence compare to others on the world stage? Well, in the most recent edition of our magazine, Too Long, we find out. That's because this 72-page issue runs down our official ranking of the world's most influential people, a vote that saw the TLDR team and more than 15,000 of you casting ballots. In the magazine, you'll learn the entire ranking. Plus, we've written articles about all of the top 25, discussing how they wield their influence and how they interact with and shape our world, including Modi's struggles in South India, how Elon took over, Giorgia Meloni's battles with the Italian judiciary, and Trump's monumental comeback story. Also, if you want to dive even deeper, the premium edition of the magazine also gets you access to bonus videos. That includes the team debating their rankings of the top 25, with it getting pretty heated at times.
We could potentially have a monumental jump on our hands.
Yeah.
Hands up for leapfrogging into sixth.
The most powerful European country, the second biggest economy, the nuclear power that is... The nuclear power!
Yeah.
We also recorded the team reacting to the audience's ranking, so you can find out what they really think about your votes. It's not just about the most influential people though. Too Long also contains articles about the current state of the UK, the new right in Europe, and if peace can really hold in Gaza, along with a whole variety of other stories. Too Long truly is some of our very best journalism, with the audience consistently saying that previous issue vastly outstripped their expectations. So if you want a copy too, head over to toolong.news to pick one up. And if you never want to miss an issue, you can subscribe, which gets you a 20% discount on every issue as long as you stay a subscriber. Plus, just this week, if you use code INFLUENCE, you'll get an additional £3 off any subscription. Too Long helps to fund our journalism year-round and allows us to keep our YouTube videos free. So we really do appreciate your support.